So as written in the agenda, we will start with our keynote speaker, Celin Gutschi. We will then move on with our presentation and panel discussion from Mara Oprea and Jordan Young. After that, we will have 30 to 40 minutes of reflection workshops on housing barriers for different demographics. And then we will wrap up for our last session before autumn, because we will come back in September. So with no further ado from my side, I would leave the floor to our keynote speaker, Celin. Celin studied law. Okay, so Celin studied law and is now working as a PhD student in law at the University of Graz. In the IECCP project, she is involved in the survey of the legal situation for energy communities in the member states, so Austria, Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands, as well as in the development of a tool that promotes energy citizenship and energy communities. Celin, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Benedetta, for the introduction. And I would also like to warmly welcome you to the next session of the Energy Citizenship Academy. As Benedetta said, my name is Celin Gutschi. I work at the Faculty of Law at the University of Graz, and I'm involved in the IECCP project since 2 years. I mainly deal with private law, and that's including condominium and tenancy law. So in the IECCP project, we have already looked at the legal systems of selected member states, as Benedetta mentioned, and surveyed the problems that arise from rental and condominium regulations. In doing so, we have come across a variety of problems that prevent individuals from actively being engaged in the energy system. So in the next few minutes, I would like to give a brief overview of the obstacles. First of all, let's briefly start with how an individual can participate in the energy system. On the one hand, there is the prosumer. This term has emerged recently and is made up of the terms producer and consumer. It indicates that individuals are no longer just passive consumers of electricity, but they're switching to producing and consuming their own electricity. And surpluses, for example, electricity that is produced but not consumed, are fed into the public grid. Then there is the energy community. This is an association of 2 or more people or small and medium-sized enterprises, and the purpose of the energy community is to jointly produce, store, consume, and sell energy. The participation in an energy community is open and voluntary, which means that basically anyone who wants to participate in such a community can do so. Exclusion of members is only possible for a few reasons and must be objectively justified. The element of voluntariness also means that no one can prevent from leaving the community again. So if you want to leave an energy community, you're always allowed to leave the energy community. And energy communities are designed to help achieve the energy and climate goals, and also try to eliminate energy poverty. But there are a variety of housing-related barriers that prevent individuals from participating in an energy community, whether as prosumer or in an energy community. For example, there are problems that arise when tenants want to participate in an energy community because landlords sometimes try to prevent it. Or even if they want to install a photovoltaic plant or another generation plant on the rental property. And the same appears for condominium owners if they want to join an energy community or if they want to install a generation plant on the condominium property. So I said that it happens that tenants or condominium owners are prohibited from participating in an energy community. However, at the European level, there is a right to choose one's energy supplier freely. So I said that's stipulated at the European level and must be implemented in the national laws by the member states. And customers simply have the right to choose their energy supplier freely, and at the same time, they can conclude more than one energy supply contract at the time. So it follows, and this is particularly important, that landlords cannot require a tenant to purchase energy from a particular energy supplier, nor can they prohibit a tenant from purchasing energy from a supplier they want. And this also applies to condominium owners, who can also not be prohibited by the co-owners from participating in an energy community. So another important but contentious issue is the installation of a photovoltaic plant or another generation plant on both rental and condominium properties. When installing a photovoltaic plant on rental properties, it's the case in many member states that the consent of the landlord must be obtained. And in many cases, the landlord is also free to decide whether to give this consent or simply refuse the installation. And often landlords are simply not interested in installing a photovoltaic plant on their rented property because maybe other tenants feel disturbed by the plant, or because they simply do not like how the plant looks. And this, of course, prevents individuals from participating in the energy system. And similar problems arise when condominium owners want to install a photovoltaic plant on the condominium building. In many member states, a condominium owner who wants to install a photovoltaic plant on the roof of the condominium property, for example, has to obtain the consent of the co-owners. And as you can imagine, this is especially difficult in large condominium buildings. As an individual condominium owner, you first have to find out the dates and the addresses of all the co-owners, because you have to ask them for consent. And it may be that they do not use their condominium property themselves, but they rent it out. So it's very time consuming to get all these addresses from the other co-owners. In some member states, for example, in Austria, it's also possible to replace the consent of the condominium owners by a court order. But as you imagine, that's sometimes or usually very expensive. And the big problem is now that if the other co-owners do not agree, or if they simply do not respond to the request for consent, the photovoltaic plant or another generation plant cannot be built. So as you can see, there's a whole series of obstacles that prevent the participation of individuals in the energy system. It's not only difficult for tenants, but also for condominium owners to actively participate in the energy system. And consent requirements make the installation of photovoltaic plants difficult for tenants and for flat owners. It's really time consuming and costly. And in our opinion, it's primarily up to the legislators to change regulations and adapt the tenancy and condominium laws so that the participation of individuals is easier or can happen more easy. However, there are already a large number of flagship projects that show how individuals can participate actively in the energy transition. And I guess we will hear about it in the next presentations. So I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, does anyone has question for Celin? Thank you, Celin, for this introduction. If you have any question, you can put in the chat, or Celin will stay so she can address them later on. or just unmute yourself. Yeah. Thank you, Celin. As I said before, housing law is often overlooked in energy policy, but we can see like how strong and impactful is in the opportunities for people to engage, or the willingness for people to engage in the energy system. So yeah. Also interesting is to see how the opportunities and the challenges to engage are shaped by the kind of tenure they have, or they're important, or the kind of building they live in. So it's yeah, really interesting. We have 2 questions in the chat. So first, Nena Silic, interested in examples of mentioned flagship projects. I think later on we're going to explore together with Mara and Jordan 2 projects that are investigating and implementing measures and different housing approaches that can counteract those legal barriers to energy citizenship or energy communities. So if you have any other project from the crowd that you think it might be interesting to post in the chat, then share it. And Cormac McKay, how many cities are failing to comply with the Aarhus Convention, and what is the reprimand? Maybe this is a question for Celin.
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's really interesting. And to be honest, I really don't know how big the number of states is that violate the Aarhus Convention. The Aarhus Convention is an institution under European law, and there are often no real consequences when you fail to comply to the convention. So member states often get fines, but I don't really know what the specific range of fines is at the moment. But if you want, I can look it up.
Yeah, I think this is another topic, how the international and national law are like not coordinated, and this can bring to differences also within the different European and other countries. So this would be also interesting to explore. We have one more comment from Eli Tatsani Stepanovic. I hope I said it correctly. So thank you, Celin. I wonder how energy communities can contribute to energy poverty alleviation. This is also something I guess we're going to explore later on with our panelists, but if Celin wants to contribute.
Yeah, I think we will hear about it later, but I can say that energy communities should produce energy collectively, and people that are affected by energy poverty should benefit by sharing electricity at a lower price, I guess. So that can be a benefit for those people.
Thank you, Celin. And thank you all for your questions and comments. So I think we can now move on with our presentation. We will have now our presentation and panel discussion. So first we will have Mara Oprea from the Institute for European Energy and Climate Policy. She's an energy and climate change expert, and she coordinates and supports the development of EU projects focused on increasing energy efficiency in buildings, building climate adaptation for cities and regions, and most frequently reducing energy poverty within Europe. Mara holds a master's degree in sustainable development as well as sustainable business management, obtained from Utrecht University and Karl Franzen Universität in Graz. Since 2016, she's worked in the renewable energy and efficiency sector to facilitate the adoption of measures fostering green cities and energy transition. Mara will introduce the NPOR project, Horizon 2020 project that is focused on energy poverty in the private rented sector. So she will explore the role of private housing related regulations in producing and reproducing socio-economic inequalities, especially energy poverty, and present some measures that have been developed within the project, which are tackling energy poverty and fostering energy citizenship. Later on, our second panelist for today is Jordan Young. Jordan is an action researcher at Duneworks. He has a background in economic, sociology, and environmental policy studies. He's passionate about diving into the social implication of sustainability transitions, combining scientific theory with real-life experiences of residents and households. So his current work focuses on energy justice, energy poverty, communities, smart grid technology, and circular housing. Jordan will also introduce an Horizon 2020 project, the Lightness Project, which is contributed to energy transition and energy citizenship through the support of citizens' energy initiatives. So after introducing the concept of citizen energy initiatives, Jordan will explore different organizational forms that are involved in the project and the barriers that were faced in the engagement of different households. So I would leave the floor then to Mara.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Benedetta, for inviting me today, and hello, everyone. So as Benedetta had mentioned, I am here to present to you the NPOR project, which focuses on alleviating energy poverty and vulnerability within the private rented sector. Unfortunately, energy poverty remains at high levels in EU member states due to increasing energy costs, geopolitical issues, and slow progress on energy efficiency improvements. And it has become an even larger problem in the private rented sector. As such, and the NPOR project, which began, you can go back to the previous slide. Yes, thank you. As such, the NPOR project, which began in 2020, is being carried out by 12 European organizations to combat this issue. The overarching aim of NPOR is to support the design and implementation of 10 policies tailored to the specific characteristics of the privately rented sector, or PRS, as you might hear me say, taking into account the needs of both tenants and property owners. These 10 policies will then have then been integrated into broader policy contexts within Austria, Germany, Estonia, Greece, Croatia, Italy, and the Netherlands. Next slide, please. So why is the NPOR project important? Well, energy poverty affects around 50 million people across Europe, with nearly 1 in 10 people on average spending more than 40% of their income on household costs, an issue which affects those living in the private rented sector to a greater degree than the general population. With the size of the PRS increasing in many traditionally home-owning countries and the duration of tenancy being prolonged, you can see that ensuring comfortable, green, and affordable living conditions for this subset of the population is becoming increasingly important. Currently, there are a number of vulnerable groups living in the PRS that are particularly susceptible to experiencing energy poverty, especially migrants, ethnic minorities, pensioners, and women. With the PRS generally having the poorest energy performance relative to the rest of the housing stock, and with the energy prices having grown so much over the last years, pushing more and more households, including middle-income families, to financial hardship, many may find themselves on the edge of vulnerability when it comes to affordable energy. Like I said before, the risk may be particularly high for vulnerable low-income tenants, especially in countries where a high share of the population lives in rental homes. NPOR is therefore working to ease the uncomfortable living conditions of vulnerable groups generated by split incentives in the PRS through project implementation. Next slide, please. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, split incentives refers to any situation where the benefits of a transaction, such as an energy renovation, does not reach the actor who pays for the transaction. In the context of energy efficiency in buildings, if the actor who invests in energy efficiency measures, which is typically a landlord or building owner, is not the same as the actor who reaps the financial benefits, such as the tenants, a split incentive arises because landlords tend not to invest in energy efficiency since they don't reap fiscal benefits, leaving their tenants to suffer in energy inefficient and unrenovated homes. Next slide. So how does MPOR seek to reduce this problem? Well, the project's objectives are threefold. First, we aim to deepen understanding on energy poverty policies for the PRS, which we did by examining 114 EU energy efficiency policies in the sector with regards to their aims, contents, and structure, and then we highlighted key patterns in their distribution and delivery. The map pictured on screen highlights some of the structural challenges that exist in the types of support currently available to energy poor households in the PRS. These policies and measures generally don't address both access to justice and access to resources, since there are very few measures plotted in the top right quadrant. The results also show a broad lack of engagement with both dimensions and a greater tendency of countries to improve access to resources, which is reflected by the prevalence of plots on the bottom half of the graph. This is due to the complexity of designing policies that target procedural and recognitional injustices, which tend to be structurally and institutionally embedded. After carrying out this analysis, we basically arrived at the conclusion that current policies and measures are inadequate to overcome issues of energy poverty for this tenure type. Next slide. This conclusion brings us to our next objective, which is monitoring the dimensions of energy poverty in the sector via the Energy Poverty Dashboard tool, which I will discuss later in the presentation. Through this activity, we seek to reveal the geographies of energy poverty and help detect, quantify, and monitor the effects of energy efficiency policies on energy vulnerability. Ultimately, this tool will assist us in calculating MPOR's impacts. Lastly, and most importantly, we aim to support the setup and implementation of energy efficiency policies to alleviate energy poverty in the PRS. Next. So far, we found that there are a number of structural factors that directly impact energy poverty, including financial, technical, geographic, and social barriers, as well as the lack of awareness and understanding surrounding national policies. Seeing as energy efficiency related policies are not a one-size-fits-all solution, MPOR tailors its policy recommendations to the specific needs of each member state within the project. Next slide. In order to do so, 10 pre-existing policies or measures were adjusted to better adapt them to the needs of the PRS. And while these measures were being piloted in our project, feedback was continuously provided via the REACT groups or regional action groups in a co-coordination procedure involving all of the crucial PRS stakeholders that are displayed in blue on the screen. Once the once the pilot's policies and measures had gone through this feedback cycle, they were implemented at the regional or national levels, or at least began implementation in the case of large-scale policies, and then replicated and scaled up nationally or multinationally when applicable. The reason MPOR took this approach is quite simple. Unfortunately, tenants are unable to make matters related to energy in their own hands. So they're unable to take these matters into their own hands, as they do not own the properties they inhabit. They can't take steps to improve the energy efficiency or reduce consumption from physical retrofitting. As such, they have to find workarounds to this issue. So the easiest method of going about reducing energy demand from a bottom-up approach relates to behavioral changes that can be adopted by tenants to reduce unnecessary energy usage, while other measures are top-down financial ones offered by governments, which can be used to retrofit rented properties and benefit both landlords and tenants. Next slide, please. So speaking of the 10 policies, I'd like to quickly run through them with you in order to give you an idea about the vast array of solutions that can be used to alleviate energy poverty within the PRS. I'll begin with our work done in Austria, which develops and implements target group specific consultation and advice materials for energy poor groups, which are as low threshold and simple to understand as possible to ensure that a lack of time or educational background does not hinder people's abilities to apply the advice. The development of the fact sheets took place in cooperation with energy advisors who mainly work with energy poor households and were developed on the topics of electricity savings, heating and cooling, and were then tested in 50 energy poor households in order to evaluate them. Finalized materials have since been used in advising energy poor households and have been distributed to relevant stakeholders in German, English, Turkish, Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian, Arabic, and Farsi. To disseminate the materials, the Austrian Energy Agency, which is a partner in our consortium, worked closely with the National Climate Protection Program, Klimaaktiv, and also with the Chamber of Labor, which are both using the materials now as their main means to reach and support energy poor households. Currently, we have 40,000 pieces that are being distributed by the Ministry for Climate Protection. Our second measure for Austria is the development of a concept for structural energy poverty mitigation measures. So during the REACT group meetings during close exchanges with the Ministry of Climate Protection, it became quite clear that policy proposals for structural measures which can help to build the foundation to support energy poor households in a more targeted way are needed. For this purpose, the Austrian Energy Agency developed a concept for structural energy poverty mitigation measures through which different activities can be implemented so that a better basis for decision-making can be created. It includes several proposed activities that are built on the numbered pillars you see on screen, including the establishment of decentralized advisor service, quality assurance of advice services, key stakeholder participation, and more. Next slide, please. So MPOR's first German policy relates to heating advice given via household trainings, where energy saving advice and low-cost technical devices are given free of charge to welfare recipients and low-income households. The program mostly focuses on electricity savings, and so MPOR focuses on developing heating-related energy advice, as well as to increase heating savings and comfort levels in the PRS. The second German MPOR measure focuses on helping people switch from their existing electricity provider to a digital prepaid meter for free that can be monitored by customers and charged live via an app or online, which allows people to better control their electricity consumption and bills. Currently, there are about 1,200 customers using the app, including a high proportion of low income and energy poor households. Within the MPOR project, the app has been further developed to provide additional utility to customers to improve knowledge about energy efficiency, and this has been mainly targeted towards energy poor households in the PRS. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Estonian policy relates to a national retrofitting grant that was established in 2010 as a public initiative under the Estonian financial institution credits, which some of you may know. It was established as a temporary measure for supporting the retrofitting economy of Estonia. However, it has proven extremely successful as the grant helped renovate over 1,100 buildings in its first 10 years. At the same time, this grant has important shortcomings, which MPOR is helping to solve by reducing its financial, administrative, and technical barriers for the energy poor, and more specifically for tenants. Next slide. The first Greek policy is the National Program for the Energy Upgrade of Residential Buildings, which provides financial assistance like subsidies and low-interest loans to energy poor households in order to improve the energy efficiency of their housing. Within the project, we worked on having tenants becoming recognized as a distinct social group so that a dedicated portion of the public budget can be allocated to the energy poor in the PRS. Subsidies of up to 90% are now possible for the PRS, so that's a nice success story. And the Energy Efficiency Obligation Scheme is the second policy we focus on in Greece. So the scheme requires a specific energy efficiency target to be reached through household retrofits. So in M4, we focus on awareness raising activities via energy suppliers to engage and guide energy poor tenants in how to best navigate energy upgrades. Next slide. Thank you. So the National Program for Renovation of Buildings is the measure being targeted by M4 in Croatia. And its aim is to encourage renovation activities, ensuring that part of the benefited households are those in energy poverty. Unfortunately, problems regarding grant distribution to the energy poor often arise. So M4 tackles these by developing better criteria for the selection of energy poor households within the program, while also simplifying administrative procedures, encouraging cooperation amongst institutions for data collection and monitoring, and also ensuring integration of new criteria for the PRS in the program. Next, please. In Italy, we organized training and information events aimed at supporting behavioral changes in energy poor households that would enable them to save money or improve their living conditions, while also increasing access to existing tax deduction schemes for energy renovation, such as the eco bonus or the super bonus. These trainings took place in schools as well as with tenants and building managers. And this targeted information and training plan was recently submitted to the ministry for approval to scale nationally. Next, please. The last measure within M4 is the Dutch energy box, which aims to reduce the energy consumption of PRS residents via consultations with an energy coach that explains how the energy saving products that they provide for free in their box, which is delivered to homes, can be used to reduce consumption. They also discuss the residents' energy consumption while providing tips that can be implemented without renovations or investments on the tenant's behalf. M4 focused on increasing the response rate and the promotion trajectory of the energy box towards tenants experiencing energy poverty. And so to do this, we developed a methodology to identify the neighborhoods most inhabited by the energy poor and to indicate which means of communication would work most effectively to reach them. Next slide. Yeah, Benedetta, thank you. So aside from our work at the national level, we also try to influence energy poverty awareness at the EU level through policy discussions, as well as through the energy poverty dashboard that you see a demonstration of here. Benedetta is kind of scrolling through it. It's an integral part of M4 that aims to respond to the lack of EU-wide data on the PRS by increasing knowledge sharing on the matter. The dashboard's data features indicator data, such as the number of people unable to keep their home warm, errors on utility bills, and so on, which are all organized by country and region and can be viewed for the population as a whole or for tenants only. The dashboard can also be used as a tool to map policies and measures that in one way or another address energy poverty. Anyone can submit existing policies to the dashboard to be reviewed and updated by the dashboard team. So if you would like to explore the dashboard or submit a policy yourself that you think would be relevant to help with the alleviation of energy vulnerability in the European PRS, you can find the dashboard at energypoverty.info/energy poverty dashboard. Thanks, Benedetta. You can go back.
Thank you. I'm going to send the link for the dashboard in the chat so that everyone has it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mara, for this.
Yeah, in the meantime, while people are exploring the dashboard, I just have, basically one or two more slides. It's really quick. I just wanted to present another tool briefly, which is the split incentives tool developed within the project. The main objective of the tool is to identify the share of the benefits resulting from implementation of energy efficiency interventions between landlords and tenants in order to then quantify the appropriate allocation of costs or subsidy rates for both sides. If you'd like to learn more about this, please feel free to send me an email as we will be hosting an event with a walkthrough of the tool And I can ensure you'll be contacted in the coming weeks to enroll in the online demonstration. Next slide. And yeah, now that you have more information about MPOR, I'd like to leave you with some key takeaways from the project so far. So we found that policies do not sufficiently focus on low-income tenants. Thus, in order to tailor policies and measures to the needs of those experiencing energy poverty in the sector, we found it's important to do several things listed on screen, but I won't go through them now as we'll have time in the panel discussion. But the most important ones are implementing a well-balanced mixture of policies and measures with the active participation of landlords and tenants to ensure that their perspectives are considered during the co-creation process. Organizing targeted information and awareness raising measures so as to ensure that resources are being invested in those who truly need them. And lastly, designing the policy so that benefits are shared equally between landlords and tenants, thereby reducing the split incentive. Next slide. Yeah, so thanks for listening, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have in the chat or during the panel discussion. And of course, feel free to send me an email if you have anything you'd like to discuss.
Thank you a lot, Mara. It was extremely interesting. Also don't know about the project and the measures. And I think this also really connects with the topic of our last session, so knowledge and access to knowledge and information, but also skills. So yes, thank you. Alexandra has a hand up, so she has a question.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for this great presentation. It was very, very explanative. I have a question. During the presentation, you said that you would explain later how was it possible to diagnose the dimension of energy poverty in the private sector. And then we went to other parts of the presentation, and I really cannot understand how we can do it. Sorry if I misunderstood something, but that's a problem that we have. Like in social municipal housing, we have a very possible, very close relationship with the tenants, and it's easier to make surveys and everything. But in the private sector, we don't have access to the bills.
Indeed.
We don't have, or the consumption. So I don't know if this makes sense, but I hope it does.
Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you, Alexandra, for that comment. I was actually, perhaps you misunderstood me when I was going to refer to later in the project was later in the presentation was the energy poverty dashboard, but I can still answer your question. So unfortunately, this is a question that is not that cannot be answered by the MPOR project, but it is something that is relevant at the EU level. So we cannot identify who is struggling with energy poverty because, as I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of indicators on how you can measure energy poverty. One of them is a high ratio of income being spent on energy measures. But then that assumes that energy poor households are not adjusting their behavior and are just spending their income on energy. And that's not always the case. We have what's called hidden energy poverty. So oftentimes energy poor people would lower their heating in cold months to save on energy. And yeah, I mean, they wouldn't use air conditioning if it's even available in summer months. So it's very difficult to actually assess energy poverty, even by connecting with energy suppliers, because they have information on current usage. But hidden energy poverty is something that they are not aware of. So there are projects that actually try to reach out to energy poor households and to energy poor tenants, but there hasn't been one methodology that specifically identifies perfectly without fail, which neighborhoods are energy poor. In MPOR, what we actually did is we found that neighborhoods that have a lot of migrants are, unfortunately, they have the tendency to be energy poor. We found that neighborhoods with students also are energy poor because they're living in these privately rented households where landlords have absolutely no initiative to renovate. And so you find that the students are facing kind of the brunt of these high energy prices and have no ability to renovate, no ability to change this. So we find that it's most important to, I guess, identify the vulnerable groups in your member state and see where they have a tendency to live and then target those neighborhoods. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, madam. That was also one of my questions. So it was
Okay.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
2 in 1.
We can also have questions later on after the presentation from Jordan, so that we can have more content to reflect on. So I would now leave the floor to Jordan. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Jordan, you should be able to share your screen now.
Hi everyone. I think it is showing, isn't it? Yes. I see a
Thank
thumbs
you.
up. Great. Thanks, Benedetta, also for the announcement and for the previous presentations. I really soaked it up, and yeah, it was also from very different perspectives than how we look upon the issue as Duneworks, because our work has mainly been focusing on engagement of citizens into energy communities. So yeah, the overall title is then recommendations for engaging and supporting local energy communities in alignment with justice principles. So again, yeah, as mentioned previously, a Horizon project, and basically one slide, yeah, next slide. Okay, basically what I would like you to take away from this presentation is what we've learned in terms of just citizen engagement. I'm just realizing I'm looking at the presentation while the camera's here, so that's not really fortunate. Let's see, maybe we can just chuck that here. Yeah, I think that works better. Okay, so yeah, to share what we've learned, which struggles we also encountered in terms of engaging citizens and energy communities, and also what our recommendations for previous, for future similar projects would be. The Lightness project, it has started like 3 years ago. We're almost done, so we've collected quite a substantive amount of data. In terms, yeah, when it's about citizen engagement, you'll understand it's mostly qualitative data. So yeah, I mean, what people find of the process and the kind of workshops we've been doing, that sort of stuff. And the starting point of the Lightness project was to create local energy communities in different European countries, Netherlands, Spain, Poland, Italy, and France. France, at some point, the French pilot has been terminated. The other ones are still running, some more successful than others. And also to put it in a bit of a context of this session's topic, housing, I think one main thing the Lightness project is trying to do is work around national, also local barriers for setting up energy communities. For example, in the Netherlands, it is not allowed by law to make a profit from exchanging energy with your peers. The technology is there, the motivation of residents is there, it's just not allowed. So the Lightness project has, for example, implemented an energy platform, which allows you to monitor your energy consumption and production and sort of virtually exchange energy with your peers. But again, it's not like people can really financially profit from it. So the incentive to join such a virtual community is much lower. So yeah, that's sort of I think important to note when it's about the legislative side of the story. And also, I think what might be interesting also for this session is that the communities differ in terms of housing. So the sort of buildings, which you will see in a minute, are very different from each other. Also, what characterizes lightness is that there weren't actually, in most pilots, there weren't actual communities present when the project commenced. That's also due because of COVID. I mean, nobody could actually speak with each other on the street or anything. So there was not much of a community present. And our role as Duneworks was to monitor the engagement process, also always reflecting on the justice implications. So just distributions, just procedures, and recognition of all wants and needs and identities of people and organizations. And we also supported in designing and implementing the engagement methods. And this is my colleague Razia at one of the workshops in the Dutch pilot. That's about lightness. I think I mentioned it briefly, what the just aspect actually entails. Here's again an example of how things are not going just. So there's this, I don't know, project developer, housing cooperative manager, whatever, saying, all right, we've heard what you want from this community. Now, please go away. We won't do anything with it. And that's, of course, very, brought very much to the point. But in practice, we do see that the sort of voice of tenants doesn't really matter, or social housing tenants especially, doesn't really matter in the decision-making processes. A short visualization of the sort of justice model we've been using. It's called the Voicer, and it consists of 6 different elements which we use to monitor and evaluate the engagement processes. All right, about the pilots, and I tried to include some visuals to really make the point of, okay, as there's a lot of different housing types in the lightness project. So in Italy, we have a condominium where 8 households are living. In the Netherlands, it's about 2 residential neighborhoods, one in Woerden and one in Quatre-Bras. And the one is, they're pretty much opposites of each other in the sense that in Woerden, we had social housing units, and in Quatre-Bras, it was financially quite affluent people who were very technology, very knowledgeable. In Poland, it is an apartment block. It's the building or block of buildings with the block of apartments with the yellow balconies. And also important to mention, in Poland, there was one housing association sort of running the whole thing. So also having the decision-making capacity, whether to install PV panels, and also whether residents are allowed to be contacted by flyering or by phone calls from the lightness project. Also important to note. In Spain, it was, you see some sort of electricity installation. I'm not of technical nature, so I don't know what it exactly is, but it's just to show that in the village of Alginet, the energy supplier is actually a cooperative, so a legal entity. But in practice, not many people living there associate themselves or identify themselves with that cooperative. It's basically for them an energy supplier. And also the village of Manzanares, and lastly a business park in Chambéry, which we were able to collect quite a few insights from, but as I said earlier, it was terminated 1.5 years into the project. So that's to give you an overview, and I'll try to link later on our experiences and recommendations to these different local contexts. This is just to give you a brief overview of the recommendations that we came up with. And we won't go through all of them today, but I made a selection of what I thought might be interesting also for this, for this sort of session. And the first overall lesson, and that applies to all sort of contexts, is that how important it is when you, and again, this is in the context of trying to set up an energy community from the outside, sort of, because we're project officials, so we're not residents there, so we're coming from the outside. we want to get to know what's happening in the neighborhood, and try to sort of set the spark for people to initiate a community and to feel the ownership there. And in order to do so, it was crucial and super valuable to get to know, people's worries, people's living situations, whatever, anything would come up if you just go on the street, talk to people, have your little clipboard with you and a pen that always looks a bit more official and important, but not too formal. Invite people to interviews if you have a pleasant conversation, and going door to door if it's allowed by whoever's running the site, and organizing informational events. And the kind of input that you collect then is everything you need, or not everything you need, but it's a foundation for you to design your engagement process. And for example, in the case of the Netherlands, we learned that people are distrustful of the government. And again, it's linked to the housing, because it's social housing tenants, and also quite a lot of people who have immigrated here who don't speak the Dutch language. And they have had bad experiences, relatively more than other people living in other types of housing. So that's sort of, we understood where it comes from, and also it had implications for our engagement process, because if you come with a sort of top-down, difficult terms, technical concepts, which you present as something that might be beneficial to tenants, including an energy platform, including an app, then they're like, yeah, all right, I've seen this 1,000 times. You're just trying to sell me something. Goodbye. Residents of the condominium also again linked to the housing situation. They are living in one building. They know each other. They have social dinners together regularly. So in that case, also there was something for us to build forth on when trying to initiate workshops, distribute information, that sort of thing. And in Poland, we learned through visiting the site that many residents are immobile and digitally illiterate. It's not necessarily linked to the type of housing they're in, but it's also a super valuable lesson for us, because then we know, okay, an app might require more explanation than in a younger neighborhood, for example. And also because people are immobile, they can't join physical workshops as easily. There's a few, I don't know, time-wise, I think I'm a bit over time already. I might go through one or two more recommendations.
It's
lessons.
fine, Jordan. Take your time. It's
okay, cool. Thanks, Benedict. Cool. So this is the next sort of lesson recommendation we have, is that in order to, and again, relates to lightness, so kind of having a use case that you want to implement in a given neighborhood, and that's how many of these Horizon projects work. I don't know if I have to say unfortunately, but it works that way. And so in case a pilot is selected for a given project, and you don't know if there's actually a community present, and you find out there is none, but you want to have an energy, or you'd like to offer the opportunity for people to set up an energy community, then it's crucial to first make sure that there is some sort of community. So, and that the presence of a community, so people talking to each other frequently, people trusting each other to some extent, is so important, because it can help you after the project, or after whatever you've been trying to initiate. After you're done doing that, then people are more likely to feel the ownership of on the initiative you created, for example, an energy community. And it also makes engagement and communication activities much less costly if you have people there running it. And well, we have two from the Lightness project. We have two sort of examples. One positive one, which was Italy, people living in the condominium, having social ties, and one where we had to put a lot of work in it to get people together, to find out, okay, where is the thing that ties people together, which we can build forth on. And it turns out it wasn't like strong enough. So we also had to concentrate, okay, there is no opportunity for a real energy community here. Yeah, so that's sort of our lesson. First, focus on the community and then on the energy. And because also I listened with lots of interest to the energy poverty presentation by you, Mara, because also in terms of energy poverty, it's very much an issue of not only costs and sort of housing, but also about, okay, what do you value? Do you value going to vacation? Hi, Alexandra, thanks for joining, and thanks for muting yourself. So yeah, it might be a neighbor which helps out with you with I don't know, your shopping or whatever, and that's also important to know if you're talking about energy. And maybe one last one. Let's see. Yeah, I guess this is also a nice one because because as was mentioned earlier, the decision-making capacity isn't always in the hands of those who want to join the community. So in the case of Poland, there was like a building CEO, or the CEO of the housing association, the building manager, and he was very much in favor of installing PV panels and setting up initiatives. But then a new manager came into place, and he wasn't as enthusiastic. So actually, all engagement activities came to a halt. So it's again very important, and again, given the legislation that is in place, so people having not as much agency, which Celin, you'll hopefully be able to do something about in the future, that people have more agency in deciding what they're going to do with their residents, that obstructed the engagement. And in Manzanares, it was sort of the same story, but with a municipal representative. So the sort of personnel changes can quickly lead to a point where the initiative comes to a stop. And it's just good to be aware of about that, and also try to build in safeguards so one person or one organization can't take your engagement process hostage. All right, I think that's enough from my side. There's lots more recommendations, and they keep being expanded. So if you're interested in the final deliverable, the Lightness project of our work package, just feel free to shoot us an email. And also, again, if you want to discuss anything related to citizen engagement and justice, citizen communities, we are most happy to do so.
Thank you, Jordan. We have a question from Eva. Eva, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Jordan. Thank you for your presentation. If possible, if it's allowed, could you please give me the name of the apartment block in Poland, in Wrocław, when the project is running? I'm asking since I'm also from Wrocław, so it would be great to me to see it in live. So if it's possible.
Yeah, sure, we'll do so. It was actually two, so I'll send through two names. And also good to know that, because of those experiences that we had there, that the community actually didn't come into being. But again, I think it might be interesting for you to know where that sort of initiatives are being set up.
Exactly.
I'll send it in a chat or via the mail later.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you, Eva, for your question, and thank you, Jordan, for your presentation. Maybe just one question from my side, because we're a bit over time. But I noticed from both presentations that communication, access to knowledge and access to skills is really relevant in tackling energy poverty and in the engagement of citizens and communities in the energy transition. Also, maybe to summarize both of your presentation, which are according to you, the main differences between the private and the public sector. So how do people respond differently in the private rented sector or in social housing, for instance? Which are the barriers and how can they be overcome? So also from the measures that you both presented during your presentation.
Perhaps I can begin. So evidently tenants have no say and autonomy in housing, and more specifically in energy retrofits. So there's this constant friction between tenants and landlords regarding renovation. This results in inaction on both parties' ends, which is of course detrimental to tenants, seeing as they experience discomfort in the home because they're cold or too warm, or high energy bills. And it's also bad for tenants as their properties do not meet the standard that the EU building stock is heading for, or one that future tenants will want. That's why tackling the split incentives dilemma has to be a shared responsibility. So landlords should invest to retrofit households using subsidies, but this would require collaboration between landlords or stakeholders representing them to push for financial support from governments. And tenants should also feel safe to express their needs to landlords and support them in retrofits with their available resources. Whether this be a signature for a petition, attendance at a council meeting, or even a small contribution towards retrofits, which can be calculated using the split incentives tool I had mentioned earlier. This, of course, requires efforts from all of these stakeholders. And in the case of vulnerable groups, especially tenants, we've seen that there's little initiative to do so for a number of reasons, including a lack of trust in the government, as well as lack of knowledge or time to do so. Those that have the power and interest to make a change in the sector, such as us, landlord associations and governments, should therefore pool resources together to make it happen top down. But the key here is to never fail to offer and encourage the participation of tenants and energy poor groups in the policy design process. So it has to be this co-design, this constant check-in, and that's the only way that the actual key target groups are not being left behind.
Yeah, if I then can add maybe also the another perspective. So from the bottom-up perspective, if you'd want to create energy citizenship, so not restricted to energy poverty, but if you pull it a bit broader, I think what we advocate for is to get to know what citizens' issues are, really, as Mara said, capturing the lived experience, and maybe knowing like, okay, a voucher for driving my kid to the school, which a voucher for sports lessons saves on my energy bill, but I can't actually afford the fuel for driving my kid there, then that's the sort of thing which you don't know if you're flyering or if you set up a website, but if you're talking to people on the ground. So I guess an approach which could work for private rental housing as well as social housing, and which might also be sensible, because in both sectors there are many barriers, is to work with local intermediaries, with initiatives, parties which are already present in the respective neighborhoods, which you can build upon, and that can help you. And I know in Lightness we could make use in some pilots of such representatives, which was really valuable. And I know for NPOR, I think the Energy Box is also a company which is also sort of fulfills that role.
Indeed, if I can just add on, so within the Dutch Energy Box, the national partner that runs this program partners with the JMA, and they have access to these energy poor households. And they found that the most effective way to actually reach them is through informal letters and door-to-door visits. So we tried a number of methods to actually contact these households, including emails, pamphlets, calls, formal letters, informal letters, and then these household visits. And the best way, resulting in over 50% of engagement, so people would sign up for the energy box and then actually follow through with the measures, would be a combination of sending these informal letters and the repeated household visits. So yeah, people feel like they are checked in with, they understand that this isn't a for-profit initiative, and yeah, we've seen good results with the combination of those actions.
Thank you a lot. Yeah, I also agree. I also think that more face-to-face and more personal contact can better work, especially in situations of vulnerability. Yeah, and we also saw in the last session how knowledge and access to information plays a huge role for people to feel also capable of taking action in energy transition and to exercise their energy citizenship and rights and responsibilities, but also to join energy communities or more community energy initiatives. I don't know if there's any question or comment from the participants. Raise your hand or just unmute yourself. And yeah, Mara and Jordan can, or Celin can address your points. If there are not, I would then thank Mara and Jordan for your contribution, and also Celin for being our keynote speaker for today.